Good morning, David.
Good morning, Yossi.
Who are you?
Who am I? So first of all, it's very important everybody understand why I'm here with him. So anybody who knows their Bible knows that when we made the unfortunate move of not going towards the Gulf and we went towards where we went, the Bible tells us that the children of Israel said to God, we listen, we do, and then we listen. Na'aseh v'nishma. So when Yossi calls me, it's always Na'aseh v'nishma. First I say yes, and then I find out what is it he wants me to do.
And as a result, you are missing your flight to New York today.
And so I'm missing my flight to New York. So who am I? I'm the global chief executive of Young and Rubicam. We are a WPP company. It's one of the largest marketing companies in the world. We buy about a third of all the world's media. We're big investors in high tech, connected incredibly to the infrastructure of the startup world. And I also happen to be an Israeli citizen.
And American citizen.
And an American citizen.
Which of these two citizenships you are preferring?
They are constantly in conflict.
How did you become an Israeli citizen?
So I became an Israeli citizen because I moved to Israel. My wife was born in Israel. I moved to Israel, and back in the day when I was there in 1979, there was slightly different than it is today. After 3 years, the government came to you and said, well, you've been here 3 years, you can't live here anymore unless you become a citizen. So you went to the American embassy and signed a paper saying you were being coerced to become an Israeli citizen because your family was there, you couldn't leave. About 2 weeks after that, you got your tzav giyus, you got your draft notice, and then you went back to the American embassy and said, my God, these bastards are coercing me again. Now I have to go into the army. So then I went into the army and became a citizen.
Because otherwise you would lose your American citizenship.
Otherwise I would lose my American citizenship.
What was your profession at that time?
Advertising and marketing. So we were
just a minute. I have a question.
Oh.
So Debbie brought to her parents a guy who was not a doctor, who was not a lawyer, who had this strange kind of...
Yeah, it was a problem.
What did the mother of Debbie say?
I think she was. That's a good question.
That's a good answer. I
don't want to go there because I think she would have been happy she married a doctor, but she didn't. Although I have to say, Debbie's parents, her father was an ambassador, was a diplomat from Israel. My late father, was a rabbi. So you sort of had this combination of rabbi and ambassador, so they were neither one of them were anyone to talk about me going into advertising, let's be clear. But just going back to what we did, so in Israel at the time, in 1979, when I first got there, we started one of the first marketing companies for high tech. And that's where I got bit by the bug. So today, we think about the high tech world in Israel, and somebody was talking before about the lack of marketing. So I can tell you, if you think that the world today is bad in Israel, about lack of marketing, imagine what it was then. So Elbit was one of my clients. Elbit at the time had developed one of the world's most incredible simulators for naval operations. Now, today you think about it, it's all virtual reality, it's real, it's moving. In those days, it was, a couple of screens and boxes and stuff. So we came in to see it, and it was literally tables with wires all over the place and a couple of empty boxes, and they kept telling us, my God, this is crazy. We bring in the navies of the world, they look at it and say this is great, but then they don't buy it because they don't know what to do with it. So we brought in Castelli, who was a very famous manufacturer of Italian furniture, who came in, created boxes and a table, and all of a sudden this stuff started to sell. But the story that to me is the most important, and certainly was my awakening to high tech, was Cytex, which I'm sure many of you remember. Effie was one of my first clients in Israel. In those days, the first time we walked into Cytex, so they were experts in what's called raster technology. If people know, if anybody even remembers what it was sort of early digital in a way. But imagine a room half this size, packed with computers, with computer hardware, a guy wearing a white coat like a doctor, because computer operators in those days were like doctors. It was magic. And there was a picture on the screen of a Revlon model. And they said to us, we will be able to change the colors of the photos so that the negatives that get printed out, in other words, for printing, will be 4-color separation in a way that you can't do. And I remember him, the guy doing this, it was incredibly complex, changed the color of the model's lipstick. It took 45 minutes to render. Like, think about that. Today, like in a nanosecond, your 2-year-old kid does that. But at that point, I knew the world had changed. That was my awakening. And certainly in my industry, it was just sort of serendipitous that was the first thing that I saw.
Did you meet Effie?
Yeah, many times. We worked very closely together.
Why don't you tell them a few words about Effie, and then we will go to the business?
Well, he was a genius. But their office was interesting, and only people who've been in the Army maybe can understand this. So his office, it was the first sort of open-ish office. It wasn't open, but it was all glass. So imagine that Effie sat here at the end, and it was glass windows all the way down, and each person below him, that was the hierarchy. It was like the Army. Each one sat in an office below, being able to look on the person below them. And so Effie was the one who saw the whole thing, and then everybody else.
He was really the epitome of entrepreneurship, of charisma,
amazing man,
of charm, of magic. It was really exceptional.
He was
exceptional human being. Okay, so far for the past, David, you are running one of the biggest advertising agencies. Your industry was totally changed in the last 10 years. The rug was pulled, the last 10 minutes, the last 10 seconds, the rug was pulled from under your leg. Facebook, Google, etc. are eating your lunch.
And dinner.
And dinner, and breakfast, and your ears also. And how you guys are going to survive, and what is broken in this industry, and how you are going to fix it.
Okay, so let me give you my view on this. First of all, advertising is alive and well. And anybody who doesn't think it's alive and well, all they need to do is go look at Google's org chart, look at Facebook's org chart, Twitter's, any one of those companies, and search out advertising and find out that they have an entire universe of people who sell advertising. So first of all, advertising is a very powerful tool still in this world. And almost every startup that I know comes to us and says, well, could you help us with our advertising plan? Because that's how we have to be. And I guarantee you, by the way, that within a year and a half, I'm ready to bet on it, Netflix will have advertising. So just wait, because you will see it, because the model is impossible to sustain. So first of all, advertising is still well. I think what happened is our industry gave up their right. When digital first came up, we gave up our right to do what we do best. So how do I mean that? So if you think about it, innovation has always been core to our industry. I believe that the first cave guy who painted on the side of a cave, that was an innovation, and advertising people figured it out. Radio was an innovation, television was an innovation, cinema was all innovation. Now, nobody looked at that in our industry and said, oh my God, how did those people get inside that screen? That's magic, or it's technology or something. We just said, wow, that's an awesome way to make money, and we figured out how to use it. We did not. We abdicated digital. So what happened was that the people not of our industry took over our space. Today, it's actually going back the other way, because if you think about it, go look at what Facebook was saying 5, 6, 8 years ago. All they talked about was their ability to target. Today, what they talk about is branding. And when you're a client, they want you to use film, they want you to use video, they want you to use all the things that we've always used, and they want you to brand, because otherwise they have nothing to sell. Amazon, by the way, is very into branding. Amazon wants you to sell your brands, because the truth is they can get more money for them. And they raise their prices, which they are, and they will continue to do so. Brands that are recognized will get higher price, and they'll get a bigger margin. So it's still very important. Here's the way I look at the world. There's three things. There's creativity, there's innovation, and there's technology. And again, this is just me. Creativity is the story. That's creating the story. That is never going to change. We will always be, my industry, and that's what we do, to have the insight, to have the understanding, is how do you create the story? Now, how do I know that that's true? Because we still read the Bible and the Quran, Shakespeare, Harry Potter, you name it, those are still popular, and we still love movies, right? Black Panther, amazing. So the creativity is telling the story, full stop. What's innovation in my industry? Innovation is how we distribute the story. So Facebook is nothing more than an innovation. Twitter is an innovation. They're innovations. They still need my stories to go in. They need your stories. Facebook without your stories is nothing. So they need my stories as well, my advertising stories. So if you can understand that you take the creativity, you take the story, you put it inside this innovation, as we always have. As I said, radio is an innovation, television is an innovation. We have new innovations today called digital or social, but it doesn't make a difference. There'll be something else, it'll be telepathy one day. And then there's technology. Technology is the game change, because technology now enables me to take that story, that creativity that I've put in that innovation, Facebook, and it allows me to create ways of interacting with that story in a different way. And that's the challenge. How do we take some of the things that we heard today? I had amazing discussions yesterday. How do I take those technologies and use it to make it easier to buy, easier to find stuff, easier to understand what it is that I'm selling? But at the end of the day, make no mistake, I'm telling a story about a product so you can buy it. That is never going to change, ever.
Let's go now to understand the role of digital compared to the role of incumbent advertising. I think Google is your biggest supplier, client, how you call it, or you are their biggest
client of WPP. Yes, I think they're our biggest client actually.
And are you their biggest client?
Probably one of them, yeah. Yeah, so
can you say numbers, or
no.
You cannot say numbers? This is a public company.
I can't say numbers.
What can you say? Stories.
I can tell stories. So I'll tell you a story.
You are
so
good
Google.
Tell us a good story about Google.
Google is very important. Google is important to our story. So I don't think Google is an enemy, frankly. I think Google is great because Google takes, so now people go and they search, or whatever means they're using with Google. I mean, there's obviously so many different ways of getting into this. But they've got to come to something that tells the story. That's why they're doing it. They want to know something. That's a huge opportunity for me. To me, Google is nothing more than a huge opportunity. And this notion that somehow Google has totally disintermediated us is wrong, totally wrong. So I think Google is a fabulous opportunity for us. And again, I think the issue is, how do we best use it?
Good. Let's play a game. I will give you a topic, and you will create a story on the run.
What he's trying to do is tell you that advertising, in the words of someone, I think it was maybe Mark Twain said, is like swill in a bucket for pigs, you know, so he thinks I can make up anything. But let's go. Yeah,
I will ask you a story that you have to invent on the fly, but I think you dealt with it in the last 15 or 20. No, not PowerPoint karaoke. This is something else.
I've done that with Yossi. It's very
give us a story about your best story about the state of Israel.
My best.
How would you brand it?
So we do a study called. So we have something called BAV, Brand Asset Evaluator. You can all look it up, and we do a study called Best Countries. It's an incredible study. We started it actually with Ido Aharoni, who some of you might know, who is Consul General in New York for many years. Ido and I partnered on this.
Of which country? You didn't say Consul General of which country?
Oh, sorry. He's Consul General for New York from Israel. And we saw this notion of Brand Israel. So those of you who know Mutag Yisrael, Brand Israel, it's very famous. It's become a standard in Israel. Now, in Israeli circles, particularly in the foreign ministry. Now, one of the things that we learned was that Israel is increasingly less relevant to younger people in the United States. Doesn't mean they hate Israel. It doesn't mean they're anti-Semites. It doesn't mean they love Palestinians and hate Israel. It doesn't mean anything. It just means it's less relevant than it was to the older generations. So there's an issue of how do we create relevancy. What blows my mind is that we don't get enough credit for what sits here in this room and for what we know really exists, which is Startup Nation. See, we live in an echo chamber, so we think that everybody knows about Startup Nation. The truth is, everybody who goes to a UJA dinner or to an Israel Bonds dinner knows about Startup Nation, but the general public do not. They have no clue where Waze comes from. They have no clue where some of the greatest innovations, I think, in the world have come from. So we have an issue, we have a problem. And we need to get out there and make sure that people understand the relevancy. Our best ambassadors are, in my view, the startup community. The absolute best ambassadors for the State of Israel, because they're the most open, they're the smartest, they're the people who have the biggest social conscience typically, and these are the people that we need to constantly put out there and hide all the politicians. Hide all the politicians and keep all the startup community out there, and we will be very, very powerful, I guarantee you.
And I want to ask you, do you really think that anybody who is not part of either the digital ecosystem, you know, Silicon Valley, San Jose to San Francisco, and or has special relations with Israel, the rest of the world, which is the biggest part of the audience, care about Israeli high-tech? Why should they care about Israeli high-tech?
Because I think what they care about is stories. People love stories, and the stories of our high-tech are great. And I think, you know, 8200, Shemona Matayim, I mean, people love these stories. And I gotta tell you, I make up more of these stories than anybody could ever imagine. And I use it all the time. So if I don't know the story about a particular Israeli technology, I make up the story when I talk to people, when I talk to non-Jews. And it's unbelievable. You just watch people's eyes go wide. I mean, I tell the story of Waze, which is completely made up. It's absolutely totally made up. And I tell the story about a couple of guys who were in some unit going into Lebanon, and they had to figure out how to make sure that their friends knew what was there. They love it.
Aren't you ashamed?
Totally not ashamed, because it makes the point, and I think that that's the point. It's about storytelling. So that's what I do best, and that's what I try to make happen. So
okay, now
we have time for one more question.
Yeah, we will do three. One, Yossi, typically your clients are the giants of the world, the giants companies of the world, like
Dell, like Microsoft, like Colgate, Palmolive, like Ford, like Unilever, P&G.
And they actually keep you in life. They give you food. They enable Debbie to go to the grocery.
Everything.
Right.
Send my kids to college.
Yet we see that the whole world in the last few years is totally obsessed with startups. How you explain it?
Because startups are giving us all a jolt of energy and excitement that we would not otherwise have. So that's why I run a program called Sparkplug. I have it now in 3 or 4 countries around the world.
Let me just interject. David told me about Sparkplug before any big company spoke about engaging startup. He told me, I have an idea how I will get the best ideas and very quickly and very low price to my client. This was what, 7 years ago, 10 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
So let me tell you very quickly what it is. We don't have much time, but in our industry, I think that it's unethical for me as an agency to invest in a particular startup and bring it to a client. There's a conflict of interest there, and how do I know it's the best, yada, 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 yada. And the truth is, most startups are not going to solve my clients' problems, but they will help them. They'll help them think, they'll help them do things. So what I do, instead of investing, is we find the best companies that we can, that we think are interesting, and variety, and we try to bring a bunch of them together. And every 6-8 months, we bring them into the office, we give them free space, we give them free services, and we let them pitch to our people. And then they take the best ideas and they bring them to clients. I am so proud that over the years, we have had such huge successes. It's unbelievable.
Okay, what are you willing to do for Israeli startups?
The same.
Quick.
The same.
The same.
Yeah, Yoni Bloch, some of you might know Yoni and know his company. Yoni started in America in my office with 3 seats.
How about Yosef Zahir?
So Yosef Zahir again, another incredible young Israeli, a Palestinian from, an Israeli Arab rather, from Nazareth, whose family makes the best tchina in Israel. It's something that we've all had. Yosef is starting up in America. I spend a lot of time with him. He spends a lot of time in my office talking to people.
He forced him to eat on Friday night kosher food. This is unhumanitarian. You know?
So I'm very honest. So he comes to me. So I think one of the things that's important to do is to bring people together. So on a typical Friday night in our house, and we have regular Shabbat, we're what you would call in Israel probably dos light. So, modern Orthodox of the left of persuasion, but we'll have Dani Dayan, who is the Consul General in New York. We'll have Yosef Zahir. We'll have the head of the reform movement in the world. So interesting people that we try to bring together specifically around Israel. And she just held up a sign that said, we're done.
Your email, so people can book a seat on next Friday at your Friday Shabbat dinner. What is your email?
David.Sable, S-A-B-L-E, @yr.com. I answer all my own emails. You can also read, I write a blog. I have a pretty big, I'm kind of proud of it. I have a pretty big following. You can read my blog on LinkedIn or weeklyramble.com. And it's really, again, I just want to thank the clients because it's an honor to be here and thank all of you.
Can I give you a kiss in front of everybody?
Yeah. Thank you.